There we go. Hello, everybody. Where's everyone joining from today?
Hello.
Awesome. Amazing. All right, Canada. All right, I see a Midwesterner. I'm here in Detroit. Peter's based in Illinois. It's not too far from Chicago, which is exciting. All right, we're starting to see the West Coast come in. There you go, Janine. Janine's here from California as well. All right, we're gonna give it a couple minutes here to get started. Give someone a chance to come online. Oh, amazing. Hello, Chicago. Yes. All right, we got coast to
Chicago.
coast officially.
Great.
And also curious if y'all don't mind sharing what types of organizations are you coming from today? I know this is a big topic talking about data, so awesome. Awesome. Got some education, public policy, housing, police reform, very exciting. Student, wow. A learning lamp, that sounds fun. Wags and walks also sounds fun.
Observation.
Awesome. So fun. All right, well, I think we could probably just start doing some introductions here. One of the things we wanted to start off this conversation with, everyone's obviously here for data, the big topic right now. But just want to share that, Sharity is also celebrating their 10 years. So we're really excited to be having this conversation and diving into a little bit more than just the actual tactical applications, but also a little bit more of the philosophy behind Sharity. So before we dive right in, just a little bit more context. It does shape everything we're going to talk about. Sharity, our work is grounded as an evidence-based model through something we call the 5 factors, the 5-factor framework. And that's something that was actually developed by our founder, Carol Wick. If you guys check out our website, you'll notice that we're also launching a book this month focused on just that. And the 5 factors is really based on real research across hundreds of nonprofits that we've worked with and identifies 5 things that we've noticed consistently predict whether a nonprofit grows sustainably or really stays stuck. Those 5 factors are plan, outcomes, budget, team, and donors. And what's particularly interesting and why we're so excited to be having the conversation that we're having today is every single one of those factors depends on data infrastructure. Your plan needs accurate data to be realistic. Your outcomes need data to be measurable. Your budget needs clean financial data to be trusted. And your team needs systems to do jobs efficiently. And ultimately, what I think a lot of y'all are going to have questions about today is your donors need to really feel like you know them, which really only happens when your data actually works for you. So really want to set the standard there that we're not just going to be talking about, the software that you might be using or CRMs. I know we'll probably get some questions about that too, but the actual foundation that holds all of these factors together to make your system run really smoothly. And then consequently, what might happen if your systems aren't running really smoothly. So I'm really excited to introduce Peter, who's also my brother, who will be kind of representing the aspect of the intersection of data, marketing, and donor behavior, and Janine, who really brings a deep nonprofit strategy and organizational change expertise to the conversation. So with that, really excited to jump in, and we'll have some slides available, but please feel free to also drop questions in the chat. We'll do our best to get to those as they come in, and we'll also save some time at the end to do a little Q&A. So off to y'all.
Thanks, Amanda. So Janine, I'd love to hear from you. When you walk into a nonprofit organization for the first time, what does their data situation usually look like?
I think this will sound pretty familiar to many of our fellow nonprofit professionals on the call. Normally, and I am speaking from direct experience, everyone, so please bear with me. But maybe you are a smaller nonprofit and you walk in and there is one coordinator, executive assistant, administrator who all of a sudden this staff member is now your organization's database administrator. Anything happens with your donor database, there is one person everyone goes to, and that person may or may not have any specific knowledge, training, expertise as a database administrator. But because that's the person who has been entering records, that person has become your expert. So that alone can be a little disconcerting, especially if you're in leadership, if you only have one person who knows how something works. Should that person at any point decide to just, I don't know, take a vacation, perhaps that person gets sick for a day, what's happening while they're away? Should that person leave your organization, who's there to pick up the pieces? We see a lot of any size organization that there are spreadsheets everywhere. I have my spreadsheet. Peter, you have your spreadsheet. We're all tracking the same information, but we can't collectively ever get any business intelligence out of it, any analysis out of it, because every time I update my spreadsheet, it's just for me and no one else knows about it. And I'm not updating that information in a database that anyone else can access. And then because all of these systems are disconnected, so maybe our marketing team is using our digital outreach platform, so an email platform of some sort. I'm over in development trying to use our database, but not really, because every time I run a report, it's not accurate. So I am relying on my communication in my Outlook or my Gmail, whatever my email client is. That's where all my communication is. That's where my best intelligence is. And again, none of that information is getting fed back to any of my colleagues. So now not only are our systems siloed, but our humans are siloed. I can't work with the marketing team. It's really hard to report out board meetings. I can't work with my fellow leaders, and I can't lead my team because I don't have any information to give them to help them do their job better. So all of this is can be an exhausting situation. And again, speaking from personal experience, I've been there, but I assure everyone, please don't worry, because there are lots of simple solutions you can implement that actually, in the long run, many of them can be pretty low cost. So we're excited to talk about that.
Janine, you and I were looking over some of the responses to this data health assessment, which we just dropped in the chat as well. So I encourage y'all to take that when you get a chance. Helps you get some insights into where there might be some pain points that can be low-hanging fruit to make some adjustments. But Janine and I were looking over some of your responses before this webinar, and we noticed a lot of folks are managing their database in spreadsheets, which Janine, you just mentioned as well.
Yeah.
What do you think, is, in terms of infrastructure, why do you think that's often the last thing that nonprofits want to spend money on?
Absolutely. I really think, maybe I hope, but I really think it's because we're all mission driven, right? We're all here working towards our missions because we're passionate about them. We really do want to make an impact. We want to solve the problem that our organizations are here to solve. I like to think sometimes in my own career, in a best case scenario, in this alternate universe, I put myself out of a job because my organization has solved the problem we've set out to solve, right? That said, I think even in my own life, there is a hesitation from leadership, many times even from boards, that every dollar spent on internal infrastructure, maybe you call that admin spend at your organization, maybe you call that non-programmatic. There's this sense that a dollar spent there is a dollar not spent on your community, not spent on your mission. And I think aligned with that or following down that, there's a perception in our industry that that is a donor ick, that donors are like, no, 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 I don't want to spend on the organization. I want to make the impact. And the only way I can make the impact is if it's programmatic. It's the only way you're making an impact. I will tell you, I've been in this industry a very long time now, primarily as a frontline fundraiser, from all different levels, stages. I've been a leader of fundraisers. I will tell you that the opposite absolutely is true. When you invest in your infrastructure, you are powering impact expansion. If you have $0, you can help 0 people. So if you invest in your infrastructure, you are generating revenue. And when you generate revenue, you're expanding your impact, expanding your mission. And that is a very solid, persuasive business case that donors love. They want to know that you are going to be around. Your organization is going to be around for as long as your community needs you.
Janine, I think one of the barriers a lot of folks have when they're thinking about what software or what system to set in place, it can be kind of overwhelming, right? Like, how do you choose a system? I'm kind of curious as well, like from your experience, where some of the pain points that you've run into with leadership at different nonprofits. What do they say when they're trying to sort out like, their data? Is it, in terms of cleaning that up and making it more consistent?
I think it's really important first to answer that, for us all in this conversation to level set a minute and just recognize that having messy data, it's a good problem to have. It means that you have supporters, you are gaining donors, you have lots of records, and you have lots of information to power your work. So I think the first place we can start is just by recognizing this is a thorny problem, and it can certainly be an overwhelming and exhausting problem, but it's definitely better than some of the alternatives. If you have no records, so you have no donors, then no, your data is not messy, because you have no data, and that's a much worse problem, right? So let's all level set. We can all just agree this is a good problem to have. I think many leaders, many of them development leaders, but actually this data problem will affect every part of your organization. It'll affect your finance team, certainly. If you have messy data, it's hard for them to get appropriate projections, make sure that we're controlling costs, those sorts of things. It does affect your program teams, because if you need to have clean data, particularly fundraising data, it helps them understand the type of impact they can be planning for in coming years. Certainly, as leaders, it affects your ability to speak to your board, to speak to your constituents and your stakeholders. If your data is messy, it means you can't properly steward or properly continue conversations. So when we talk about what do we hear from our clients when they come to Sharity, or what do I hear when they're talking about this? A lot of that is, you all know that your impact is capped by revenue, and your revenue is getting capped because you can't pull the business intelligence from your data to tell you where to focus your efforts. The other part of that is it is leading to burnout. So we as leaders are burnt out because we always have to raise more, right? There's always more to be done. Our teams are burnt out. So fixing your data, investing in that infrastructure and cleaning it up is really, the downstream effects are transformational. You are raising more dollars without having to hire headcount. And I think that's really one of the most persuasive business cases you can make.
Yeah, that's a great point. I work a lot with, helping organizations, understand the whole journey, right, that a donor takes, or, prospective donor to eventually converting. And one of the things that's really valuable to know, right, is the types of actions a supporter's already taken, right? When did they join your list?
Yeah,
Did they attend an event or sign a petition or volunteer? Right? That helps your fundraising team really understand and know how to curate messaging to drive those prospects towards deeper engagement. Recency is also really important, right?
absolutely.
Knowing how long someone's been on your list since they last took an action for your mission. Right. For example, if it's been quite a while, right, it might be worth spending some time re-engaging that person with a lower bar ask before trying to get them to make a donation again.
Absolutely.
There's a couple of notes coming in the chat here about folks who, already maybe have a system, so a CRM that needs that next level of cleanup, which might include, historical data, or they're doing a lot of manual work. When someone's kind of at that stage, what would be their next step, or how would you advise if they're kind of already in a platform that may be working for them, but not to its fullest potential?
I would say certainly if you're doing the cleanup work, you are on the right track. And let me commend you because that is something, it is really difficult to automate some of that because the humans know the other humans, right? The humans know if this person's email is their work email and they happen to make a donation this month with their work email, and usually they make it with their personal email, and those are the people on your team. So if you're doing the deduplication work already, the historical cleanup, I really commend you because that is the first step. What I would say is while you are doing that, be thinking about and identifying what are the spigots, if you will, what are the hoses that are turned on that are creating duplicate records, or what are the processes and procedures that are maybe not written down, so not everyone knows about them, that are creating gaps in your data and your history. And if you can identify those, you can really then not just clean up, but you can turn off those hoses, right? And I think that's really an important part of it. If you are already doing the work to clean up historical data, I really encourage you to take a look at the SOPs that are written down at your organization for managing duplicates into the future. If your team does not have those written yet, many people don't, so you're not alone. It's writing SOPs, I will be the first to tell you, is way down on that priority list of things to do every day, right? But it really is having written SOPs that everyone knows about. They're stored someplace that everyone can access. There has been appropriate training, particularly for the people who need to execute on those steps, but also across the board so that just the organization is aware that these processes are in place, and that if they identify a duplicate in the future, something like that, or they're not sure if something's a duplicate, they know who to go to ask. And then holding yourself and your team accountable for executing those SOPs. That is huge. So much of data hygiene is really about the humans who are in the loop. And SOPs and training go a long way to solving some of those data hygiene problems so that you don't end up in the same place 12 months from now. If you put in the work now, the SOPs will make it so that, duplicates happen, but they're happening at a manageable rate, and you're addressing them as they happen, whether that's weekly, monthly, every few weeks, that sort of thing.
A couple folks in the chat are asking some questions on, if you have multiple people, right, entering data, how do you kind of track, right, and make sure that there's, first of all, not too many duplicates, but also understanding where those folks are, potentially coming from. One thing that's really important and can be really helpful is, adding some sort of source attribution, or, when you upload that record or update that contact in your CRM or in your database, having some sort of indication of where they came from, or what action they took recently can really help in terms of that segmentation and understanding, how to engage with them down the road.
Many of the platforms out there now have workflows that can be automated that can add, sometimes they're called tags or flags, depending on what program you're using. Some programs can automatically sort them into lists or campaigns or groups. Again, choose the vocabulary that fits the system you're using. Automatically for you so that, on a regular basis, you can go in and you can see, hey, this is someone who first engaged with us through this way, through social media, or responded to one of our emails or came to one of our events. And now they're also part of this group. They're also part of that group. Hey, we found out when their birthday is. And so now they're part of the May birthday mailing list, whatever it might be. There are a lot of tools that are already available to you inside of your platform. And absolutely, if those are things that maybe you're new to your platform, or maybe you've been using your platform and you just don't know what's available in your current version, absolutely something we can at Sharity can help you optimize.
Yeah, it seems like quite a few folks maybe are overwhelmed with the vast amount of data cleanup that needs to happen. So I'm curious, what the process looks like. And one of the questions we got from Alexa is, how often would you recommend doing this cleanup? So for folks who are coming into an org that have a ton of cleanup needed, how can they maybe break that into pieces? And what are the steps you traditionally take? And kind of maybe a checklist that you'd identify for those folks.
I think it will vary a little bit for everyone, but some general rules of thumb. And feel free to hop in here, Peter and Amanda, if I miss something here. But I would say is first, when you take the time up front in any major project, take the time up front for what I would call discovery. Is take the time you invest there saves you time when it comes to actually executing tasks that you need to clean up. So I would say understanding that work has to continue, but take the time to be a little bit of a detective and try to formulate for yourself when you say, hey, my data is messy and data cleanup needs to happen. Exactly what does that mean to you? I tend to default to duplication because the majority of clients that I end up working with, duplicate records is the root cause of a lot of other data issues. So, we can't get accurate giving history because our online giving platform, every time someone makes a gift, it's not connecting it to the right record. It's creating a new one, something like that. So we have many different things connected to our CRM and they're not talking to each other. So our duplicate rules aren't catching it. So we have lots of duplicate records. So be the detective and see if you can find some common root causes. Is it duplicate records? Is it, there are many different platforms out there with many different ways to run reports. And is it just you're using some queries that maybe the template itself was created 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 years ago, and maybe the template is simply outdated or some filters got toggled that shouldn't be. So maybe your information, your data actually isn't messy. Maybe we just need some training on how to pull reports or build queries so that you can do the analysis you need to do. Is your data messy, or has simply the questions you're asking about your constituents and your stakeholders, are they different? Are you collecting the data that you want to collect? Or are you just collecting the data you've always collected? That's another important question to ask yourself. So if you can spend a little time at the start being a detective and deciding when you say my data is messy, or if it's your teammates, colleagues, leadership coming to you and saying, every time I do X, it's not right. Figure out what that actually means. Once you know what those root causes are, then you can really decide what kind of manpower or what kind of technology tools do we need to clean up any data that is in fact incorrect? This data is incorrect. It is messy. It needs to be updated. And we can then decide what are those, again, what are those spigots or faucets or hoses, whatever you want to say, that are continuing to create a lack of data integrity. So whether it's duplicates or it's updating records and it shouldn't be, or it should be updating records and isn't, what are continuing to make bad pieces of information into the future, and how do we turn those off? Many times those are technology tools. And then the final part of it, I really can't stress this enough. So many times, clients come to us and it's not actually a technology problem. It is a human problem. Having written SOPs that everybody who is going to engage with your database has access to, can review on a regular basis, knowing who the person or people at your organization they can go to with questions, being committed to that type of training, and then holding your teammates accountable. If you are on a CRM software platform, every one of them has some sort of audit trail. So if you are part of the team that's responsible for the database and you start to see some patterns, hey, this person or this group of people is consistently forgetting this field. I worked with a client where in their database, they call gift records or proposals opportunities. So on their opportunity, the most missed field, the field that was filled in the least on their opportunity, was the gift designation, where the donor was telling the fundraiser they wanted the money to go. That's a pretty big, that's arguably one of the most important, after name of the donor and amount, that might be the most important piece of information you should be recording. And it was the field that was filled in, not just, I think it was less than 40% of the time. That's a huge issue, but that's not a technology issue. That's a training issue. So they decided, guess what? We don't actually have to spend a lot of, this isn't a technology problem. We don't have to spend money on getting a new blah, blah, blah to do this. All we have to do is go and spend a concerted amount of effort training our fundraisers, training the people who are creating these records that this field is important. Here is why it's important. Here's what it means. Here's why you got to fill it in. And if it continues to not be filled in, we're going to come see you every week. And we're going to say, hey, you built 2 or 3 or 5 opportunities in the last week. You didn't fill this in. You got to fill this in. That takes time and effort, 100%. But it is significantly less time and effort than doing a database migration, than everyone maintaining their own spreadsheet, then having to have a fire drill every time there's a board meeting because you need to collect everyone's spreadsheets to actually be able to tell your board how much money you've raised in the last quarter or since your last board meeting. The human side of this is really going to go so far in terms of data integrity. And Peter, I suspect from where you sit and your point of view, the human part of it is critically important too.
Yeah, so I want to mention as well, another piece of information that's really valuable to attach to your donor data is something like highest previous contribution. Right, that's a really valuable data point to have to inform your next ask, or maybe even to embed it dynamically into a campaign that you're sending out to your list. Helps decide what that ask amount should be, right, for that next campaign that you're going to be developing around. Another thing that's really critically important in terms of donor data, and what I consider might be some lowest hanging fruit for those of you who have a CRM already, is segmentation, right? If you're comfortable sharing in the chat, I'd love to hear how many of you are using recency in your email segmentation, right? Are you considering when someone last opened or clicked through an email appeal? that can really help you, get your open rates, click rates up on that in terms of your engagement of your email. And somewhat paradoxically, you also see sometimes, in most cases, actually, a significant boost in your revenue, right? Because you're sending positive signals to inboxes like Gmail and Hotmail and other inboxes, which are then rewarding you for that higher engagement by giving you higher inbox placement. So even reducing a little bit of that email list size ahead of a big tentpole moment like Giving Tuesday or year end or another major giving moment that you have on your calendar can be a really helpful way to boost engagement and drive more revenue.
Yeah, and it seems like we're getting a couple questions about just the difficulty that takes place in tracking. I just want to kind of wrap up just answering Alexa, your question about how often do we do data cleanup. So there's this initial wave that Janine mentioned with the people that really is important, and even understanding the infrastructure that you're working with. And then what pieces to tackle. But I think Peter will go into this a little bit more on kind of the day-to-day operations side tactical approach when we're actually engaging donors. This is an ongoing data cleanup process, especially when we talk about that segmentation. We're constantly reevaluating to try to make sure that we're monitoring the right KPIs. One of the questions we got here is particularly about donors, which I feel like a lot of y'all probably have questions about, is, how, first of all, when is it ever appropriate to ask donors if they're still connected to a cause, and or what brought them in the first place? And how can we make sure that the data is giving you those answers without us having to always ask them? So I'd love for maybe Peter take a first stab at that, and Janine share a little bit more of your experience there.
Yeah, I think part of this too depends on how or what relationship you already have with that donor, right? And their history with your organization, right? If they're a major donor, right? Having that context of how they joined your organization for the first time or what actions they've taken in the past can do a lot in terms of nurturing that donor and getting them to make more serious contributions down the road. For smaller donors too, right? Understanding how they previously took action for your organization, whether it was a volunteer event or signing a petition or just attending an event, right? Can help keep them engaged and drive them towards deeper engagement down the road.
What if there's a lot of contacts that maybe haven't yet been tagged or interacted with, so that we're not actually aware of where that donor came from or how we have a relationship with that donor? What would you guys advise doing at that stage?
I was going to say, so I think it depends a little bit too if we're talking about your sort of annual giving level or if we're talking about a major donor. So if you're talking about that major donor level who's already in a portfolio and there should be presumably you have a one-on-one type relationship with them. I think that's the type of information. A tactic I've kind of used is maybe part of your cultivation plan is you introduce this person in your next meeting to someone new at your organization. Maybe, you bring a board member along this time or an advisory council member, you bring your leadership along, something like that. And if that's the first time they've met, it's a really awesome opportunity for this new person in this relationship to be like, I love to hear directly from the people I'm meeting, why you've chosen to invest in our mission. It just is so much more meaningful to me or impactful when I can hear it directly from the source. So there's that. My sense, though, is in asking that question, perhaps you're talking more about that really annual givers who are responding from digital marketing, who are coming to our events, who are giving in a different way that is not quite at the one-on-one level, right? And in that case, if what you're looking to do is to do some segmentation, I would look at their giving history first, and I would see, are they giving unrestricted gifts or are they giving restricted gifts to maybe their region or to a particular program? So that will tell you a lot about their passion. I might say, recency is also, as Peter said, really important in that sense. Specifically, what campaigns or appeals are they responding to? So that will tell you the type of messaging that is resonating with them, which can give you an indication of their passion area, or which part of their mission is most meaningful to you, or to them rather. And then I might say, and Peter, I'm going out on a limb here because this is your area of expertise, but I think, there are some tactics out there, whether it's through online, it's like social media engagement, or things where you can directly ask. It's maybe you're not directly asking that person, but I don't think surveying or doing pulse checks with your donor base is out of the realm of the possible. You just don't want to be doing it all of the time, because you don't want to send a signal like we're not listening to you. I would say make sure you have the system in place to be able to see what those responses are. But I think, Peter, you might have some more insight down that line.
Yeah, another great way to get a pulse check on your existing database, especially if you're missing some data from, historical data from when or what actions you might have taken previously, is to use tactics like surveys, right? Some of you might be familiar with Typeform or Jotform. We found these kinds of surveys to be very effective at gathering some information about why someone cares about your mission, for example, or what actions they might want to take in the future, right, to support your mission. A lot of people, that we found have really like to take these types of priorities or engagement surveys, and you can be very vulnerable about why you're trying to gather that data, and try to understand, why they're interested in your mission in particular. And there's always an opportunity to then upsell those folks, whether it's through segmentation or redirecting them to an opportunity based on their responses, to take further action. So strongly recommend taking a look at some of those tools. Typeform, Jotform can be really, really effective ways to gather some of that data and to upsell people to further engagement.
Yeah,
I
just
know.
to add here that
No, go ahead, Amanda.
really fun and engaging. I know I just got something recently that was truly just asking like, how are you getting what you want from us? Like, and then you can kind of provide things that your organization may feasibly able to do, and some of those options. Like, could we be doing this more? Could we be doing this more? And that gives you also opportunity to take some of that data and multi-purpose that data with your regular email campaigns, because even if folks didn't fill that out, they're probably thinking the same stuff in the rest of your list. So it's a really great opportunity to just kind of repurpose the results.
I know there may be some limits on the capacity your current tools have, and that's understandable. Obviously, all of these suggestions come with the caveat that first and foremost, evaluate what you have and look at optimizing what you have. If it turns out that what you have, maybe your organization has outgrown the tool or tools that you have. Maybe the tools that you have are expansive and wonderful, and maybe your organization is actually at a point where you're like, listen, based on where we are, what our projected growth is, and the expertise we have on hand, these tools are actually too much for us. We need something that's simple and straightforward, that I can use, that my teammates can use, that everybody can use across the organization, and we actually need to simplify a little bit. All of those things are absolutely appropriate. I really encourage you, and at Sharity, we encourage you, though, to think about optimizing what you have first. And sometimes optimizing is as simple as, again, just investing time rather than dollars in training, in exploring, using the support packages and the training videos and library and documentation that come with your different tools to better understand how to use them, how they're intended to be used, what new features are there since the last time someone went through this process, that sort of thing. And then making sure internally with your staff that everyone who needs to know how to use these tools knows how to use them. And that is a very cost-effective way to maybe start getting some of this segmentation done if it's not there already.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And oh, I was just going to say, Kelly, I see your question there about using recency more with email marketing. A really good example of this is heading into a big giving moment, right? Like Giving Tuesday or year end. Um, one organization I work with was sending a very high volume of appeals to their donor audience right ahead of their Giving Tuesday campaign. But they weren't actively excluding donors who had already given to a particular appeal, which led to a lot of high value donors actually opting out of future communications, right? Because they were feeling so inundated by appeals. So adding something like as simple as a recency screen or a donor suppression for folks who've already taken action on a particular campaign can go a long way towards protecting your high value donors, but also protecting email deliverability, right? Making sure that you're still sending really strong signals to inboxes, that you're not spamming your audience, right? So that you get that high inbox priority placement.
Amanda, I was going to say, I know you brought up this uh, slide, and it's one that I really love. This slide itself was created with the thought towards a CRM, a full project, and how that's like buying a new car. But it really is applicable to any sort of investment in a technology platform your organization is going to make.
Yeah, it looks like
Before,
Carmen made a comment in the chat just about
yeah.
constant contact, their existing platform being a real challenge. So I'm wondering, Janine, if someone maybe, how do you actively kind of evaluate, we obviously want to use the systems we have, but in addition to maybe getting a new CRM, but how do you actively evaluate your current CRM to see if it's doing the job through this method?
Awesome. First and foremost, particularly like it's a total pain. So understood, why is it a total pain to your organization? Is it because your organization is at a place where you want to be able to do things that just constant contact is not designed to do? That is, there are computer programmers somewhere out there in the world who built the zeros and ones behind constant contact, and that's not what they built it to do. Is it that we just have not had the training? Our team hasn't had the training on how constant contact does what we need it to do. So I think it's really important to ask internally all of the stakeholders who are using constant contact. Maybe it's not just your team, maybe your program teams are also using it to communicate with your community, whoever's using it, asking them, how are you using it? How do you want to use it in the future? And can it meet those needs? Is it a technology issue or is it a human issue? That is what's going to tell you whether or not this is an investment your organization should continue to make or whether it's time to pivot to something new. And that's kind of where this concept of buying a new car comes in. If you're going to go buy a new car, you need to ask yourself, how do I drive? Do I drive? Am I like a weekend warrior? We go off-roading and we live in the mountains and we love hiking. So we need it to go here, there, and everywhere. I live where there's winter. So it needs to have, four-wheel drive or something like that. I live in Los Angeles. So for me, I don't need any of that. I'm not an outdoorsy person. What I need is a car that is very fuel efficient because gas is expensive here. So maybe it's fuel efficient or maybe it's electric, whatever it is. And it needs to be a highway car, right? I am on freeways all day, every day. But that might be very different for whoever you are. So you need to know, and that tells you even what kind of car to look for. Are you putting a whole family in this car? Is it just you? What's important to you? Are you ready for the sports car of your dreams? Or are you like, no, this car needs to get everybody to soccer, hockey, volleyball, dance, drama, and occasionally we like to go on vacation together, that sort of thing. Once you have agreed on that and you have agreed on a relative price point for whatever this is, maybe your finance team tells you, listen, you can get a new email client, but it's got to be the same price as Constant Contact. There's no more room. Or maybe they're like, hey, no, if you can show us the ROI that getting this new thing is going to drive additional revenue, sure, we can make some room for some additional spend. Have that in mind before you do any test drives, before you do any demos, before you, I was going to say put into Google, but lately it's Gemini or ChatGPT. Which email client is the best for my organization? Have those things taken care of. Talk to your stakeholders, understand what your budget is. Because just like buying a car, once you decide to go on a demo, they are going to show you the highest level trim, right? The highest level trim. It's going to have all of the things, all of the awesome, amazing things. It's going to look wonderful. But is that what your organization needs? And you'll only know that if you do the discussion beforehand. So I hope
Kevin, I like Kevin's comparison here to the car, to it being like a fridge. The other thing that we see before you go grocery shopping, which makes sense, the other thing that we see a lot, and some of the clients that come our way are maybe they got their CRM a long time ago, and it didn't have a lot of the tools that are now embedded in some of these platforms. And so, their socials on one full separate platform on Hootsuite, and their email marketing is through MailChimp or Klaviyo, and then their donor database is over here. So I'm curious, I know we want to make sure there's some time for Q&A here, but definitely be kind of asking yourself the question throughout the entire journey with your CRM, not just, where you are maybe right now.
Well, and to kind of go off of what you just said, Amanda, sometimes it's not the CRM and the infrastructure that's really the issue. Is that these different systems aren't communicating with one another, right? So we specialize in helping these systems communicate with one another, whether it's your donor platform that you're using. An organization we're working with right now has Donor Perfect for their donor system, and they're using a separate system for their email marketing. Right? If those systems aren't communicating together, it's very difficult to make certain segments, right? Or to introduce some of that recency screening or those suppressions around big moments. So making sure that communication's happening is really critical.
Yeah, I think the last big item we want to make sure we touch on, but we're also now kind of formally in our Q&A, so please feel free to drop any of your guys' remaining questions in the chat. We'll do our best to get to all of them. But a lot of the new platforms that we're seeing develop have AI integration built into them, or this conversation is becoming really pertinent. So I'd love for y'all to both just kind of talk about our experience with how our AI tools can work in integration with our donor data.
Certainly, I would say even if your platform is on the older side or an older version, if AI is someplace that your organization, from a strategy standpoint, a full organization strategy standpoint, is headed or would like to head, I would once again reiterate, evaluate what you have, because if you do not have AI tools in one of your platforms now, it may just be they have another version of that same platform that does have AI integrated. So just keep that in mind. Sometimes you don't have to do a full pivot. Sometimes it's just a matter of evaluating the tools that you have and what's possible with them. But I would say AI really is the way to work smarter, not harder. And I know that's such a cliche, that statement, but it is true. No matter how much money you're raising, you could have record-breaking year after record-breaking year. We all know in this business that that all that's doing is expanding your impact, which means you're solving more need, which means you're going to have to raise more money, right? Because there are more people out there that you can serve. That's really where AI can help you do that. It is not a way to replace your people. And I think that's a really important message for your teams and your staff to hear from the very top down. AI, you're not headed in an AI, you're not getting AI strategy, you're not bringing it in to replace them. You're bringing it in to help them. And I think first and foremost, that's a critical message that your staff need to hear from the top. I would also say, as a preference, and what I advise is when possible, whenever possible, default to the tools that are inside of your platform, whatever that platform may be, because those tools and those language models then are only pulling from the information that is inside of your platform. Anytime you go to an external one, ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, whichever one I'm sure will come up next week, anything, something like that. This is just a word of caution. I'm not saying don't do it. I know many people do. I'm just saying, just remember, it's important to remember that whatever you put in is now in the public domain. It is part of a public language model. So just knowing that, particularly if that comes around donor data, or if you're an organization that's research-based, or you have impact numbers that you're feeding into something to help you write a grant or something like that, just be aware of the information that you're putting into the public domain. If you can keep that inside of a platform you already have, then you're just feeding it into something that's already reading from the same information. So from my perspective, a lot of AI has to do with just being very intentional with it, and making sure that there are some strong policies and procedures in place from an organizational level that keeps your organization protected, keeps the people you serve protected, and also gives your staff the confidence to use the tools that they have available to them, so they know that it's to help them truly, and not to try and take away anything from them. Peter, I think you probably have a perspective that's a little more tactical on how AI can actually help accomplish some of these things. So,
Yeah, no, Janine, and thank you. That was a great explanation. I think data privacy is definitely one of the bigger concerns that folks have. A lot of you responded to that data health assessment saying that you're using AI writing assistants, whether it's GPT, Claude, or Gemini, to help draft some communications. And I would just say that a lot of these tools are also being built into some of the newer CRMs, right? So you can create, and this goes to automations as well, automating your workflows, automating some of your communications, but still being able to dynamically pull in, if you have it, some of the donor history, the record of how these supporters have taken action for your organization, so that you can curate messaging to those individuals a little bit more fine-tuned, right? And help increase engagement in that regard. I definitely recommend though, still, having a human, someone on your staff who understands the mission, who knows what you're working on, QAing everything, right? That's generated, because you don't want to get into a situation, right, where this hallucination happens, right, or some information's brought in that isn't accurate, and then that jeopardizes that relationship with that donor.
absolutely. I saw here, I think it's Riley, was talking about the optics also of particularly AI, if you're at a conservation nonprofit, or another one that's around environmental issues and challenges. That's really an excellent example, Riley. Thank you, of why AI is something where there really should be organization-wide conversations about it. It does need to fit into your mission. Or maybe it's more at this point, it's here. So maybe it's about how, or when, or where is it appropriate to incorporate into your work, as opposed to just everyone's out here and we're all doing it and nobody's talking about it. That is a sure way to have some challenging conversations in the future, right? So to the best of your ability, if you are someone who can influence that type of strategic conversation. I know I have seen many organizations who are actually looking to their board for some governance guidance around what are some policies we want to have around AI. And even if they're very broad, maybe it's just a framework, but getting those conversations started is really important. And then also along those lines, Peter, bouncing off of what you said, one caution I will say as you're building out that strategy around AI is just like your current systems that are maybe not AI, is bad information in does have bad information out. So it is critically important to keep a human in the loop. But the first step to being ready to use AI and to optimize what AI can do for your organization is to make sure that the information AI is pulling from is accurate to the best of your ability, which brings us full circle back to our cleaning our data conversation. That's the other thing from where I sit, I usually recommend is before we do anything, let's think about how we want to use AI, but let's get clean data first so that whatever AI tools we do end up using in the future, we can minimize the potential for hallucination, for it being more work to correct rather than helping us minimize steps to execution.
Thank you so much, Janine. I know we're getting a time here. I think we might have time for one more question, but if not, I dropped some links. Please feel free to email us directly or just send a comment in the chat so we can reach out to you directly after. We will be following up with a webinar. We recommend taking that data health check that we sent out prior, and I'll put back on the screen as we wrap up here. But just kind of want to end on the note, and maybe Peter, you can answer this, kind of what that good flow ecosystem would look and feel like going through. So we have a good vision and horizon for everybody who's joining this call and where they might end up.
Yeah, I mean, the goal here ultimately is to have better communication, more accurate communication with your donors and prospective donors, right? So that at the end of the day, you're nurturing that relationship and you're driving them to further engagement, especially during those tentpole moments, those big fundraising opportunities that you have throughout the year. Right. And having all of your data in order, right? It's a big, challenge in some cases, but even starting small, we talked about some of those, like the survey tactic, for example, to start replacing or getting some of that data you don't already have can go a long way right now. I know a lot of you are ending your fiscal year pretty soon. Right, this is the time to start thinking about, what the next year looks like. And for those of you who have fiscal year ending at the end of year, right, it's not too soon to get started on end of year and Giving Tuesday planning, right? It's never too soon to get that plan in order. And so now is the right time to start sharpening that data. And that all is going to just feed into the whole system, right, of your creative planning, your communications planning, so that everything lands truer and sharper when the moment arises.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, everybody. We're looking forward to continuing the conversation. It seems like we may need to do another tactical conversation after this, but we hope everyone found this really useful. And yeah, we'll be following up with everything after.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.